Welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Sunderland are once again on the road this week as we make the journey to London to face a Millwall side who are having, shall we say, an interesting time of it lately. And to give us a lowdown on everything is returning guest Alex Grace of the excellent ThatMillwallPod. Alex, it's your second, I was going to say performance on the show. I meant appearance, but how are you doing anyway? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, as it is, just to be clear to everyone, we're recording before your game with Ipswich and our game against Huddersfield. So if people think I sound a little bit 6 out of 10, shall we say, that's because I don't know if we beat Huddersfield yet. And we have just lost against Plymouth. But let's sort of kick straight off with it. I said it's been interesting. I think, to be fair, it's been turbulent in Millwall recently. I think you've lost 3-0 at home. You've won 4-0 away. Your manager's departed. So I think the biggest news out of that is obviously Gary Rowett's gone. And I remember speaking a few times to Millwall fans last year, obviously when we signed Ballard and stuff like that. And look, we'll get into that crazy day last year, but it seemed like he was relatively well liked at Millwall. Obviously he's gone. So what went wrong and how did it end up in his sacking?
I think anyone outside of the club would have been quite surprised to see Gary go. Those of us associated with the club, not too surprised. The journey had run its course. He'd done 4 years. The heartbreak, I think, of losing to Blackburn and in the way that it happened, I think that just took so much out of him. I think there's a common thing where people have said that he was sacked. He wasn't sacked. He made the decision himself. He decided that it was time for him to move on, that he'd done enough, or he'd done the best job that he could do over that period of time. And to be fair to him, 4 top half finishes, you can't fault that. The one disappointment he will have is not being able to take Millwall into those playoff places when really they should have done it last year. They were certainties for a long time, and then I just had a terrible run at the end of the season. I think they suffered a bit of a burnout, to be honest, and then that capitulation against Blackburn just summed it all up.
I do feel bad sort of mentioning it, but look, I was at Preston on that final day, and I think we said at half time, we went, look, let's just win the game and enjoy ourselves. We're not really expecting to get in the playoffs here. It was unexpected at the time. And then Millwall, as you said, just capitulated. Look, it was great for us. I imagine it's completely gut-wrenching for Millwall. But how much did that affect Millwall as a club? And did the hangover enter the new season, especially with Gary Rowett? You kind of indicated it might have done there.
Yeah, I think it might have done. I think if you look at our start, wasn't an easy start. I think the first 3 games we had to go away to Borough, at home to Bristol City, and away to Norwich. It's 3 tough games to start your season. All right, we got the win on the opening day. That was a Borough side suffering from the players they'd lost. Likes of Archer and Stefan and Akpom had all gone. And they had to really get used to a new team, because quite a lot of those players were on loan last season. They weren't able to keep them. We lost at home to Bristol City. That was a real disappointment, one of the lot, I think. That one, because it was a day where they honoured the chairman, because the chairman died over the course of the summer in an unfortunate accident. And then a really, really poor performance at Norwich. And that really, I think, was probably the point when Gary Rowett decided he wasn't going to stay after that. He had a bit of a bite back at the fans who had given him a bit of grief and stuff like that. And I think after that, it was always going to be very difficult for him to stay. And so it proved, because I think that was the end of his relationship with the fan base. And unfortunately for him, he just couldn't seem to get things going again after that. And I think the playoff hangover has come in. I think it has affected us. Some players, like Tom Bradshaw and Z and Fleming, the two catalysts from last year, haven't got going yet this year, and that's probably the symptoms of why Millwall aren't doing as well as many might have predicted them to be doing.
I promise it's the last time I mentioned this game last season, but Sunderland fans will tell me off if I don't. But like I said before, I was at Preston, and like there was a 10-minute spell where everything we hit went in the back of the net. Diallo scores like goal of the season, and you're thinking blooming heck, and then the second goes in, then someone goes, hang on a minute, like Blackburn's just equalised, and then because the first half felt very like Duncan Watmore scores twice, of course he does,
yeah,
and it felt like, well, this is going to be Sunderland where it's a bit of a damn squib, let's just win the game, and what will be. You're getting towards the end of the game, the fourth one goes in, and like I'll openly admit it's one of the best away days like I've ever had in seasons, if maybe ever, because it was fantastic in the way that it happened. But there's always an opposite side to that. Normally it's Sunderland. This time it was Millwall. But how was it for you the opposite way around? Was it kind of one of those games where you're always going to reference as typical Millwall? You know, one of those games that every fan base has.
I think. Even at half time, the scoreline was 3-1 at half time, and we were thinking, it was always in the back of our minds, if Blackburn score one, it's going to get extremely nervy. Yeah, and I've got to say, Blackburn gifted us 3 goals. They were, I don't know what had happened to them, but they gifted us those 3 goals. And we just begun to start looking a bit ropey, a bit... what's the word? Fragile, and as soon as they scored, you knew what was going to happen. It was just one of those, you could sense it coming, and it would be Ben Brereton Diaz in his final game would score the goal that meant that we wouldn't get in the playoffs. And he loved playing Millwall. He always scored against Millwall, and just Blackburn as a whole, they're a team that Millwall don't beat either. So you just knew what was going to happen, basically. It was a painful one. It did hurt for a little while after it, I must say.
Opposite for us, but there is Luton Town after all, I guess. So,
Luton.
Yeah, Luton. Moving on to new things. Obviously, you've appointed a new head coach, which I know very little about, if I'm honest. First full-time job as the main man. He's been at Everton and Chelsea as like under 18, under 23 assistant manager. He's had a short spell in charge with England under 20s in interim charge, I think. Tell us a bit more about him and obviously your first impressions. I know he's only been there like 2 weeks or something, but what have you took so far?
He's a very good talker. From the dealings I've had with him, I have had a few dealings with him. And yeah, I have to say he's top class. He's very, very easy to talk to. Answers the questions honestly. I spoke to him after the 4-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday, and then I spoke to him again on Saturday after the 3-0 defeat to Coventry. And he understands what he's come into, and he's very honest in terms of what he wants to do and where he wants to take the football club. He wants to change the playing style, wants to evolve the playing style, make it a more attractive style of play, which a lot of Millwall fans were really happy to hear because they wanted to see this change. They wanted to see the team play in a way that's more dynamic, more attacking. If you look at Gary's style, it was cautious. It was defence first. It was, look, let's not lose. Not let's not win, but let's not lose the game rather than trying to necessarily go out to win games, especially away from home. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes. I think it's a similar model to what Kieran McKenna is at Ipswich. It's a similar style. Again, a young head coach. They're trying to follow that model, I think. But you've seen a lot of EFL clubs have gone down that route now. I think if you look at Oxford have just appointed a manager from the MLS who is very highly regarded amongst the City group, and Leicester as well with Enzo Maresca. So Burnley with Vincent Kompany. So it's it's a model that's coming across, and a model that seems to have been quite successful for quite a lot of clubs. It's just as to whether it's not going to happen overnight. And the good thing you get at Millwall is you get time. You know, you don't get it at a lot of clubs these days, but what they do at Millwall is they're always prepared to give you time. They gave Gary time, they gave Neil Harris time before him. So, yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting period for Millwall. He's got his work cut out, I think, a bit, Edwards, because he's limited now with the players he's got, are the ones he's got to work with, of course. And whether they will be able to transition into that style as quickly as he would hope will be an interesting thing to see. It
feels like not a very Millwall appointment. Now, you know Millwall better than I ever will, but I mean, just looking to sort of previous managers, you've got, I kind of remember Ian Holloway being there, Gary Rowett obviously is one of them, Neil Harris is obviously part of it. Mm-hmm. There's managers in there that, you know, Dennis Wise back in the days, I remember. Whereas this feels very, very forward thinking, not in the sense that Rowett and whatnot weren't, but it's taking the risk on a young manager and doing something a little bit different. Is that being really well received by Millwall fans, or would you prefer someone with a steadier pair of hands, or do you feel like you've done that and you've tried and it's not worked?
Well, it was between Edwards and Nathan Jones for the job. Then obviously it was Edwards who was given the go-ahead. I think it's quite a bold, brave appointment, personally. I think it's quite interesting. It doesn't come without risks, of course it doesn't. You know, but you're throwing someone in who's never managed it or been a standalone manager. But we had that with Neil Harris. You know, he wasn't a standalone manager before then. Obviously, he had the backing because of being a club legend and stuff like that. But you still look at it and you think, well, all right, it's a risk, but he's got a good level of senior pros at the club. He's got people that understand the club there as well. You know, the coaching staff, and you got the likes of Jake Cooper, Sean Hutchinson, you know, Tom Bradshaw, Ryan Leonard. They're all players that have been there a long time, you know, but playing under only their third manager. So, you know, if you think Harris did, I think, nearly 5 years, Gary did 4 years, you know, so it's a club that gives time. And it's very rare that they would bring in a manager if they didn't believe in the process that they were trying to do and stuff like that. You know, I've seen times with Millwall where they've appointed managers who perhaps they like the idea but weren't solely convinced on it. You know, if you think back to the Steve Lomas appointment, you know, everyone's sort of very strange. You've appointed an ex-West Ham captain. It was never going to go down well with the fan base. The Ian Holloway appointment at the time, you know, was one that everyone thought would work. And then I don't know. I don't know what was wrong with that guy. I really don't know what happened to him. I think he just lost it. He completely lost it. You know, at times you end up with playing with 5 strikers on the pitch or something like that, and you're losing 3-0. It just didn't go to plan. I don't know what happened to him. But no, it's not a traditional Millwall appointment. You're right with that. And it's definitely a risk, but I think it's one that the fans welcome, and it's certainly one that I welcomed.
Looking at these first 2 games, look, you can't judge anything from the first 2 games at all. Like, I think it would be completely unfair for any Millwall fan, let alone a Sunderland fan, to assume what happened. But contrast and start: 4-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday, 3-0 defeat home to Coventry. Both sides struggling. Probably the most interesting one from a Sunderland perspective is the home game, and the most recent one, because obviously we're playing you away from home. I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, maybe just one of those games. But then, you know, I looked at the start that you've had. And in terms of your home games, the Den's a difficult place to go. I remember getting a point last year and I was like, brilliant, that'll do. You know, nick a point, like, head off home. But you've lost 6 of your first 9 games at home. I think, look, I don't have the stats, but I know it was one of the toughest places to go last season. What's gone wrong with the home form?
It's been all year. It's been since the turn of the year. I think we've won 6 games at home in 2023. It's just not. It's been very difficult. I remember playing Sunderland. That was the highest attendance at the ground, I think, since 2005 or something like that. And that, I have to say, was a cracking game. I think it was Dennis Serkin got the equaliser for Sunderland. He got knocked out, I think, by
he was out
George
for weeks
Long.
after that as well. He was out for absolutely weeks. It was like uppercut, wasn't it?
He got absolutely pounded by George Long. George Long, don't even start me on George Long, Jesus. That's it. It's I don't understand what's going on with the home form. I really don't know. Again, it used to be a very, very difficult place to come. And it will get back to that level, I'm sure, at some stage. But in terms of what's gone on this year, we lost to Huddersfield, I think, towards the end of last season. That's when the real bad run begun. We got war-knocked, is how I described that game. Got completely war-knocked. We lost one to Birmingham. We absolutely battered them for 90 minutes, but couldn't score. And they scored and won the game. Blackburn, obviously, the last day, we lost that one. And then our first home game of this season was in the Carabao Cup, I think it was, against Reading. And they tore us apart. We lost 4-0. Lost the Bristol City game. And I don't know. It became quite difficult, I think. It was hard to get the fans going because Gary reverted back to a back 5 for the start of this season, and the fans didn't take to it. They didn't take to it. They got frustrated quite quickly. And look, once you go behind, it's very difficult because you've then got to get the fans going. The players have got to get the fans going. And it's just gone wrong. It has all gone very, very wrong. It's just been very easy for teams to come to the Den and win. If you silence the crowd at the Den, you've done half the job. And that's exactly what most teams have done this year. They've come there, they've known how to silence the crowd, and that breaks the influence out. And it's difficult to really get going. And look, if you're 2-0 down, all right, you score 1, the fans can power you back in. But the other problem is, for Millwall, they just haven't looked like scoring goals. So that's the problem as well.
Because of the start that you've had, I think before the season, like if I'd spoke to you before the season, I imagine you would have said, look, let's try and go for the playoffs again, because that's historically where you've been the past sort of 4 years. You're not anywhere near there at the moment. And don't get me wrong, you're not really near relegation, although it is the Championship and things can change within 3 games or so. But from a fan base, I don't know, I'm maybe assuming this and everyone's different, but you said before about Millwall being patient. I find your fan base is quite patient.
Generally, yeah.
Has your expectations realigned? Is it now just a case of staying well clear of relegation, the 7 to 9 points that you are, finding your rhythm and this new style of playing with the new boss and rebuilding under the new manager, whereas this season's kind of just solidifying, stay clear of relegation and find the positives from the games that we've got left? Is that the expectation now?
Yeah, look, I think we're always a second half of the season team. We don't tend to start well anyway. And then we tend to come on strong at the end of the season. But obviously now with the new manager and the way he wants to play and stuff like that, it's going to take a period of time for him to get his philosophy across, for him to get the players that he wants to get in as well. It wouldn't surprise me. Look, I'd settle for a quiet season. I really would settle for that. I wouldn't mind having a mid-table solid campaign, as long as we're not involved in the battle down the bottom. And look, I think this year, a lot of teams are going to be having a sigh of relief because I think the bottom 3 they are pretty poor. I mean, we've played Sheffield Wednesday. They were poor. We played Rotherham. They were absolutely shocking when they came to the Den. We beat them 3-0. We went to Hillsborough and won 4-0. And I think they were worse than Rotherham. It's dreadful, those two. The QPR, you've got to wait and see how it goes with the new boss. But I did see they won last night. But I don't think they're good enough. I think the rest of the Championship is probably having a big wish to think, or a big sigh of joy that they're not going to get pulled into it. You know, I think there's 4 teams maybe. There's those 3, and I don't think Huddersfield look great. So those 4 for me are probably the 4 that are going to be down the bottom. But you can never guess in the Championship. I know Rotherham are looking for a new manager, and I know Neil Warnock's out of work, so you never know how that can go. But no, I think any Millwall fan, I think they'll be happy just for a quiet season for once. We don't seem to have many of them, so I think they'd be all right with that.
We fancied a quiet season last season, and then, well, we all know what happened in the end, but I'll take that one, I guess. But yeah, I was going to mention about Huddersfield then, so they don't look too strong, and remembered we're playing them in a couple of hours, so I'll keep my mouth shut. Another big point of interest is 2 names I haven't actually seen for a while, probably since last season, but I'll ask anyway. Duncan Watmore, George Honeyman, both spent many years at Sunderland. One came through our academy, one captained us. They've been with you about a year, well, Honeyman over a year, Watmore since January. What's been the impression?
Both of them actually are quite interesting players. George was out. He got injured in a pre-season friendly at Gillingham and missed quite a big chunk of the start of the season. He came in at Sheffield Wednesday, I think it was, and he was very good up there. You know what you're going to get from George Honeyman. You know, he's a full-blooded player. He wears his heart on his sleeve. You'd like to think he could give a little bit more going forward. You like to think there's a bit more of an end product from him. But he's a player that works well at Millwall because he gives his heart, he gives his passion and everything like that. And that's what the fans like to see. Duncan Watmore, he suffers really bad with injuries, doesn't he? You know, he really does suffer with injuries. He came on actually on Saturday, and he should be able to feature tonight at Ipswich with a bit of luck. But I like Duncan Watmore. You know, I think he's someone who, if he's fit and gets a run of games, he can be very, very good. I think the best game he's had this season was away to Plymouth, actually, which was Gary's last win. He was outstanding there, and then he scored in the following game against Hull, and then he got injured celebrating the goal. So other than that, we've not seen an awful lot of him, which is a real shame, because I think he's a player that, if he can get a run, he's a very, very good talent. And he's someone that would be quite good at this level if he gets regular game time.
Yeah, you know, he should have flourished at potentially a high level. Some fans won't agree with me on that. Obviously, did all right for us in the Premier League in a pretty bad team, and then does his ACL twice. And I think those injuries have kind of followed him a little bit. It's hard to come back. So it's good to see him getting some minutes. But I think that is going to follow him for a long time. There was one player that I think will actually have more attention than both of those players I've just mentioned. And I don't actually know whether he would play or not, but there seems to be, and we all know why, but a little bit of needle between a certain Alex Pritchard and Millwall fans since he did his West Ham celebration, I think you would call it. Is he in for a rough ride again this Saturday if he gets in?
I imagine he would be, yes. I think it'll always be remembered. And what Millwall fans do, they don't forget. They don't, and they do hold grudges. So, yeah, he's not someone who's very popular in SE16, and I don't think he'll be getting away with not knowing that he's at the Den, put it this way. Although I believe he got the assist for Sirkin's goal.
He did.
So that quietened the crowd a little bit. But no, look, I think he'll get a bit of grief. But that's what football's about, isn't it? You know.
Oh yeah.
He's the type of player that quite likes to get the fans up and rolling, doesn't he? So, it's all part of the game, isn't it?
It's funny you mentioned about not forgetting and holding a grudge. There's any Sunderland fans old enough to remember, I still really hate Casey Keller. Long story, mid-90s, but I still really hate him. Got Don Goodman sent off in a Coca-Cola cup, and I have not forgiven him to this day.
Don Goodman. Now, Don Goodman doesn't like Millwall either. He absolutely hates Millwall. I think he got... I might remember him saying he got injured. It might have ended his career or something like that.
I think he just hates Casey Keller still. I think it's a Casey Keller thing. He's similar mindset
possibly,
to me.
Yeah. Yeah, he does not like Millwall, I have to say. You never hear him say a good word about Millwall. I always worry as and when he's on the commentary for Millwall, because we usually lose if he's on. No, but he's been with Sky for years. Mm-hmm. Don Goodman. He's been about for so long. I think they were saying, because they did a playoffs preview show, which I begrudgingly watched last season. And I think he was saying it was either his 10th or 12th year doing the playoffs. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's been quite a while for Don. Tells you how old I am that I remember him as a footballer, unfortunately. Looking at Sunderland, I think, not knowing tonight's result, of course, we've been solid if inconsistent, no matter the result tonight, actually, to be honest. But I know we've been on the TV a lot this season. I know this because I've had to travel down to home matches far too early from Glasgow. But from what you've seen of us, what have you made of Sunderland? Do you kind of what you expected, or better or worse?
I thought it was always going to be an interesting season for Sunderland because of, I think last year was an overachievement. I think most Sunderland fans would agree. Look, they got in on the last day. Probably could have beaten Luton, really. I think if they'd done better in the home leg, they'd have beaten Luton. But again, Luton were... I'd begrudging. See, now, I didn't rate Luton. I don't think Luton were great.
Effective, though, weren't they? That was it. They were effective. Well,
we let them away twice because we played them at their place and we were 2-0 up. And then Tom Lockyer in particular got away at the Den with 2 penalties he should have given away, and he managed to get away with those. But I didn't think they were great, Luton, but they did what they had to do. That word effective. Sunderland, look, I think you look at the young talent they've got as well. It's the worry is if they don't get up to the Premier League, is they'll lose a lot of those players. I thought they'd struggle when Ross Stewart left. I was a bit worried for them then. But then if you look at how they've played, they play very good. I think Tony Mowbray is a very solid manager at this level. I was surprised when he went there, I have to say. But you can't fault the job he's done. I think he's done a terrific job. But he did a very good job at Blackburn as well. So we shouldn't be surprised with the job he's done. But I like the likes of Jack Clark. I think he's a very, very good player. I think Leeds will forever regret letting him go when they let him go to Tottenham, because he's a quality talent, and he's shown a lot of teams that this is. But I did see, am I right in saying that there was a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old scored a winner for Sunderland earlier in the season or something like that?
Chris Rigg got the 5th goal in a 5-0 win over Southampton.
He was born in something like 2007 or something strange like that.
Terrifying. Never mention that to me ever again. We're talking about age and I feel very old now. But yes, he's only 16 and Jude, very different. Just
Job, he's very good as well.
Yeah.
He's very, very good as well. I mean, I think they made some very good signings, and they've got a good manager to bed those players in. No, I've been very, very impressed again with how they've done with such a young squad.
Last but not least, as always, the thing I always get consistently wrong, I don't even know why I bother, is predictions.
Oh, God.
I don't even know what Millwall we're going to face, because to me, in my head, Millwall's a tough away game. Then you look at the games you've had and you've been stuffed 3-0 at home. Some games, like not just on Saturday.
I think it's the 3rd game we've lost 3-0 at home this season. Leeds, Swansea and Coventry, 3 games.
it should make me feel more confident, but our away form is flipped from what it was last year, where we were great away from home, quite poor at home. We're now pretty decent at home and haven't won in 4 away from home. I don't think we scored in 3. So I'll go 1-1. And I think I'd probably take that, if I'm honest with you.
I would take a 1-1 draw. I'd take anything. A point at home would be good. I'd take a point. To have only had 7 points from 9 home games is really poor. I think a lot of it will depend on how we do tonight up at Ipswich. But no, I would go along with a 1-1 draw. I think both teams, as you say, are not great in their respective home and away. So no, I think a draw would be a fair result. And I think also there'll be a decent sized crowd there as well. We've not tended to do very well in front of sellout crowds at home. But you know that Sunderland will bring an army. They always do. A terrifically well supported team, and they always make noise. And I think, hopefully, I hope the Millwall fans turn up as well, because I think that'll be a decent game. What I will say is it'll be a good game to win. There's history with the two teams. You think back to, a sore one, I'm sure, for Sunderland fans is 2004.
Yeah.
So
bloody Cahill.
Do you know? I think we've done you 3 times that season as well.
Yeah,
we won both the league games, and the FA Cup semi-final. So no, it'd be. I'd quite take a draw. Definitely take a draw. So yes, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to partner with you on 1-1.
Alex, thanks for joining us always, mate. Always good crack.
No problem.
I've managed to not mention it too much at the end, but I did mention it quite a bit at the start, so thankfully you let me off. But Alex, if anyone wants to find, obviously, That Millwall podcast, it is a really good podcast, and obviously Sunderland fans might think, why do I want to listen to a Millwall podcast? But it is really good. There's a reason that a lot of people listen to it outside of Millwall. Where can we find it?
You can find it on @ThatMillwallPod on Twitter and on Spotify, Acast, wherever you get your podcasts.
And I would thoroughly recommend following the Twitter page, actually, because whoever runs it's actually relatively witty and quite funny and self-depreciating, and that's my kind of shtick.
It is good, the guy that runs it, I have to say. He is top notch with how he runs it. Very, very good.
Alex, thanks very much.
Privilege.